Hi, good day everyone. I'm Aldrin Sialum and I'll be your teacher for today's lesson. Okay, so how are you doing today, guys? I hope that you're doing fine. Okay, but before we proceed with our topic for today, let us close our eyes and recite the prayer to Saint Michael the Archangel. So, everybody, let's pray. Saint Michael the Archangel, defend us in battle, be our protection against the wickedness and snares of the devil. May God rebuke him. We humbly pray. And do thou, O Prince of the heavenly host, by the power of God, cast into hell Satan and all the evil spirits who prowl through the world, seeking the ruin of souls. Amen. Okay? All right, and before we begin class, let us know your thoughts. Let us share ideas regarding our topic. So, what do you know and what comes into your mind when you hear the word literature? Anybody? Yes? Wow, very good. What about the others? Wow, that's nice. Thank you so much for your participation. Okay. Now, delving deep to our topic for today, which is the introduction to 21st century Philippine literature. Okay, let's now proceed. First up, why do we study literature? Educators and past and present students of literature tell us what the subject means to them and how it can continue to enrich the lives of students in the 21st century. So yun ang reason why we are studying literature is because it enriches the lives or our lives, not also us students or you students, but also other people in our society. Okay? Then, literature seems to be a subject that both befuddles and captivates students. So that's what literary works are doing in our lives. Its themes, in every novel, in every poem that we read, a good literary work is able to befuddle and captivate our interest. And there are usually no right or best answers. And yun ang maganda sa mga literary works and genres today. The author or the writer is free to express his or her opinion, and as well as the readers as well is free or are free to express their own opinions regarding the literary piece. But at the same time, some students credit it for inspiring them and opening up their minds to new worlds and perspectives. So that's what good in literature. It opens up the minds and the perspectives of us individuals, especially those who read it. Just like naalala niyo ba yung Noli Me Tangere and El Fili that Jose Rizal wrote during the Spanish regime? Okay. Okay, the reason why nagkaroon ng revolutionary people during those times is because they have read what Rizal has wrote or has written, okay? And that opened them to new worlds and perspectives na there is actually abuse in the government with the Spanish, okay? Then what is 21st century literature? These are written or published works from the year 2001 up to the present time. So that's basically it. Lahat ng klase ng literary genres na sinulat from 2001 and up to today, 2022, and up to the years to come are belong to 21st century forms of literature. It is a reflection of human nature and a means of learning and relating to others. So, yun yung sinasabi ko kanina, literary works are written or the purpose why the author or the writer wrote that literary piece is because he or she wants to relate his or her ideas to the readers or to other people. Okay? Then it can also be a modern way of expressing ourselves in social media such as on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and YouTube. Okay, so kasali din dito lahat ng ating mga Facebook posts on on Facebook and Instagram and as well as to other social media platforms. So since yung mga yon is may mga text na involved. For example, we are creating our ideas or giving our opinions on certain issues on our society. Since every literary work is consist of text and ideas written in every platform, yan considered yon as part of 21st century literature. And guys, are you familiar with Twitterature? Yeah, the Twitter has its own literature. Okay, and people there are posting their literary piece and conversations, and those are also parts of 21st century literature. And share ko lang din yung sa TikTok when people are sharing their conversations. For example, may dalawang magjowa na, or not necessarily magjowa, or friends, sharing their thoughts, sharing their conversations. For example, uh, they are talking of a certain issue in our society, and yeah, that's also part of 21st century literature since mga text din ang involved doon. Okay. Philippine literature in English in the 21st century has a short history. However, much has already been written about its writers. So kung titingnan natin, as I said earlier, 21st century literature is lahat ng mga literary genres and forms and works that emerged from 2001 until now, or until the present, and up to the incoming years or the upcoming years. It is roughly like 20 years already. So it is actually very short. Even though Rizal's No Limit Tangere cast a long shadow on Philippine literature, today's literary scene is seen different from what it was in the past. So, yan, yung works ni Rizal, even though 100 years na yung existing, the No Limit Tangere and the El Fili, it is actually part of our curriculum ngayon. And tinuturo yun sa grade 9 and grade 10 if I'm not mistaken. Kung ikukumpara natin yung 21st century o yung form of literature today, it is actually quite different because those works of Rizal uses, highfalutin words and mga salitang hindi maarok, lalo na yung Spanish translation. And if you'll also be able to translate those works in English, you will find that very, very hard to understand sometimes. Then, according to Dr. Lily Rose Tope in 2009, despite all linguistic debates about what is standard and what is not, creative writers have jumped the gun and used English, especially the non-standard kind, in the creation of language. So, ang sinasabi lang dito ni Dr. Lily Rose Tope is we use English not not the standard English or yung klase ng English that is used in the United States and the British countries, but we created our own identity of using English language, especially in writing. So kung mapapansin nyo, uh, Filipino writers has identity or a unique identity over American or English writers. And sometimes, Filipino writers and each one of us, are quoting Filipino words and even dialects just to let the reader understand the context of their work better. Okay. Then Dr. Gemino Abad in 2012 makes clear in the book Horde of Thunder that Philippine literature has evolved over time writing. So Dr. Abad testifies what I'm saying, that there is an evolution in our literature, especially 21st century literature as compared to previous or the contemporary literature that we used to have. Okay. Then thus at the turn of the last century, American English having been established as the medium of instruction in our public school system, we began to write in English, but sooner than later, we wrote from it. What is crucial, in other words, is the making, with words and words from a given historical language of an artifact which should have the power to move its readers by what it represents or simulates. So basically, yung mga ating mga Filipino writers are uh, created their own identity not because they don't have the capacity to use the standard English which the Americans and the English writers are using. It's just because it's a way of adapting to the language itself. And syempre kapag ginamit mo yung language na hindi naman tayo native speakers, especially English, and your readers, most of your readers are Filipinos, how can they understand what you're saying or what you're trying to say? That's why we have our own Philippine English, okay? Then Dr. Abad as well in 2012 also writes that during the first phase, it is the struggle with language that engrossed our writers. So according to Dr. Abad, there is actually phases of us using the English language, especially in literature. Alright, yung phases na yon na sinasabi ni Dr. Abad is yung struggle of us adapting or using the English language not only in our day-to-day communication with other people but also in our literary works. Okay? So ito the first phase is yung ating struggle or yung mga Filipino writers struggling to acquire or to learn the language of English, especially when they write. Okay? Because syempre it is our L2 or second language. Actually we don't actually born using the English language. Of course, there is a struggle when we learn another language. And during the second phase, from the 50s and the 60s, the issue of alienation and social commitment, which took root at the time of the Commonwealth Awards in 1940. So this era is actually part of Americans colonizing our country. And although our Filipino writers or our fellow men creating their literary pieces, although they are struggling using the English language, they still pursue it and continue using it. And until the Commonwealth Literary Awards in 1940, but there is the term called alienation, which is very evident because we are not used to speak in English because we are Filipinos. And during the third phase from the 70s and to the 80s, a period of political activism that began as early as the 1950s. So, since we are colonized by the Americans, syempre we adopt their government which is democratic or the democracy. And when the communist activism entered our country during the 50s, it turns out to be different, because writers, uh, the theme of writers in their literary pieces are not are hindi mga gawa-gawa lang, and those are actually relevant issues happening in the society. So there is actually, adjustment period during this time when another political idealism entered our country, and the issue of nationalism and national identity. And during the fourth phase, from the 90s to the very present, the issue of universal human rights, globalization, ecology, and a changing moral order. Okay, so as it is said by Dr. Abad, yung mga theme na ng ating 21st century literary pieces is all about human rights, globalization, ecology, and a changing moral order, which most of those most of those came from American and Western countries or Western writers. Okay? Today, Filipino writers in English no longer struggle to write like the Americans. Okay, so there are actually Filipino writers na kapag itinabi mo yung kanilang literary piece sa isang English or American writer, you will actually don't notice. You will actually will not notice the difference between them because our Filipino writers has already adapt to the English language and they can use it, proficiently, especially in writing. But there is still, the identity of being a Filipino writer na kapag nabasa mo yung isang literary piece, although pure English siya or para siyang native na speaker yung nagsulat nun, there's actually the identity of being a Filipino because acceptance and awareness have made our writers use the kind of English that is used in Philippine society. So yun nga sinasabi ko, there is Philippine English, although it is pure English. Then, in the Likhaan Anthology of Philippine Literature in English from 1900 to the present, Dr. Jose Y. Dalisay describes the new generation of Filipino short story writers in English. Thus, their politics will be bourgeois, liberal. Very few will profess an active solidarity with the barefooted bushwhacking Marxism of old. So, yan nga, that's the result of us being a democratic country. We also adopt the liberalism or the liberal culture of the West, our literary genres and pieces are, they are open to any kind of theme, although it is sensitive, such as gender, gender equality, religion, and politics. Okay, their chosen issues tend to be those of gender and sexuality, the environment, cultural identity, and individual freedom. So that's what I've been talking about. Uh, those are relevant issues happening in our society today. Kaya nga, there's a bill before sa Senate, the SUGI bill, sexual orientation and gender, but something like that. Ang pinaglalaban lang nun is the LGBTQ plus community wanted an equal right with with the normal male female citizens of this country. And those are actually relevant issues in our society today, just like yung gender, 'di ba? 'Di ba sa mga CR before, meron lang silang two types of bathroom for male and female. Now, meron ng uh, meron ng middle sex, the lesbians and the gays have now their own space in those platforms or in our establishments. Then, the environment, yeah, cultural identity and individual freedom, those are democratic issues which are relevant today, and those are the usual themes that we will see in our 21st century works. Yeah. Then, they possess a deftness of language that comes not only from reading but also from speaking and listening to the language all the time. It is an English inflected with the resonances and accents of pop culture, the internet, the stock market, and yet also of the home in the province that no one ever quite leaves behind.